The Pittsburgh Steelers have had one of the weirdest off seasons I've ever seen. First, they traded for DK Metcalf. Phenomenal move, trading for a borderline top 15 receiver in the NFL, boosting up at that receiver room, much needed. But right when they make a move like that, 2 months later, they trade away George Pickens out of nowhere, and the only reason I can think that they traded him is attitude issues, and that's it. Besides that, it makes no sense why they traded him away. Now, it's DK Metcalf number 1 and Roman Wilson number 2. But at least he added another good defender, Jalen Ramsey, to the team. However, they traded away Minkah Fitzpatrick out of nowhere. So now they have 3 pretty solid cornerbacks on the team and no free safety. They're making moves that just make no sense at this point. We're going to be going over the Steelers roster and going over how just bizarre this offseason has been for them. First, we gotta talk about Aaron Rodgers. Now, the Steelers QB situation has been a complete mess since Ben Roethlisberger retired. They tried with Kenny Pickett, but he's just not an NFL quality starter. But last season, there seemed like there was some hope. Russell Wilson would miss the first 5 games of the season, so Justin Fields would step in and he wasn't too bad. He seemed like a pretty decent game manager, led the Steelers to some wins, lost the last 2 games though, but it didn't seem too bad. But Russell Wilson came back and the Steelers started balling. Russell Wilson wasn't to his standards in Seattle, but he looked like he was still pretty good, and they would start off to a 10-3 start. But they would lose the last 4 games. Russell Wilson would play terrible. They would lose their division lead in the AFC North, and then they would get smacked in the wildcard round by the Ravens. After this disastrous ending to end off the 2024 season, Justin Fields would sign with the New York Jets. That's going to be a very interesting situation, and they would move on from Russell Wilson, and he would sign with the New York Giants. So for nearly 3 months, the Steelers only had Mason Rudolph and newly drafted Will Howard as their quarterbacks, and that's just not going to do it. So they would go ahead and finally sign Aaron Rodgers to a 1-year deal on June 7th, and now it is official. Aaron Rodgers is going to be the number 1 quarterback in Pittsburgh, and that's definitely going to be an interesting situation. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is not near as good as he was in Green Bay, but he's still very productive. For a 40-year-old man, those are pretty good stats, and I know Pittsburgh has a weird tendency of making quarterbacks game managers, but we'll just see what happens in Pittsburgh with Aaron Rodgers. I'm hoping, actually, you know what? I don't really like the Steelers, so I'm hoping it doesn't go well. And then losing Najee Harris to the Los Angeles Chargers is pretty devastating. Now, I know in each of his first 4 seasons, he had a crazy amount of rushing attempts, but playing all 17 games in each of your first 4 seasons and rushing over 1,000 yards is incredibly impressive, and losing someone like Najee Harris is a pretty big blow. Najee Harris would go on to state that the Steelers just didn't have any identity on offense, which makes a lot of sense, and I really can't blame him for leaving. The running back 1 going into 2025 is Jalen Warren. He's going to be entering his 4th season, and for the past 3 seasons, he's been running back 2 for the Steelers, and he's been alright. He's put up some decent stats, but honestly, with his play style, I don't like him being running back 1. But the running back 2 coming into the season, and someone I'm a big fan of, is Caleb Johnson. He's a 3rd-round rookie from Iowa, and I really like him. I think he's really underrated, and dude was a beast for the Hawkeyes, and I think he can do pretty well in the NFL. And now we get to the wide receivers I talked about a little bit earlier in the video. Obviously, them trading for DK Metcalf. What a good move. Getting not just DK Metcalf, but George Pickens, 2 top 15, top 20 receivers in the NFL. This receiver class, this receiver room looks so good. But then 2 months later, seemingly out of nowhere, they would trade away their young receiver, George Pickens, to the Dallas Cowboys for seemingly no reason at all, maybe besides attitude issues. Like I said earlier, that's probably the reason why they did it, but still, you had a hole, and then you fixed it with DK Metcalf. Now you have 2 solid receivers, now you give away another solid receiver. What are you doing? Outside of DK Metcalf, this wide receiver room is one of the worst in the NFL, with wide receiver 2 being Calvin Austin. He's alright, he's nothing good. And then 2025 Robert Woods, and then you got guys like Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller, Ben Skoranek. Just not good enough. And it would have been better if they had George Pickens, but still, just I don't understand what the Steelers were doing when they traded him away. Okay, we're done talking about the madness at quarterback, running back, and wide receiver, so now we're going to be looking at the tight end situation and the O-line. The Steelers are kind of stacked at the tight end position. Pat Freiermuth is a very solid tight end. Jonnu Smith is pretty solid as well. Those are 2 very good tight ends. Darnell Washington, he's okay. I don't think he would be starting over any one of those guys. But I remember him coming into the NFL, and I was thinking this dude would be a starting tight end at a lot of places, but he's kind of just in a bad position. We now get into the offensive line, and this has been synonymous and infamous for the last few years of being a very bad offensive line, but it's slowly getting better, and that starts with the left tackle, Roger Jones. They drafted in the first round in 2023, and he's very solid. I'm going to get this name wrong, Troy Fautanu. I don't know how to say that, but the right tackle, he only played one game in 2024, and he was the first round pick for the Steelers in that same season, so we haven't really seen a lot of him, but if he stays healthy this season, then expect big things from him. I'm also going to say this name wrong, Isaac Sumalo. I think that's how you say it. He's a left guard. He's entering his 10th season, but last season he made his first Pro Bowl game in his entire career, and when he's healthy, he's pretty solid. He's dealt with injuries in the past in his career, but if he stays healthy, I'm sure he can have another Pro Bowl type season. And then you have center Zach Frazier and right guard Mason McCormick, who are entering their second seasons in the NFL, and I'm sure they're going to improve as well. So overall, a very young offensive line, but they are improving, and I can see this unit being a top 10 O-line by the end of the year. And now we get to the Steelers defense, and the Steelers defense is the reason why they are consistently in the playoffs or the playoff hunt. There is a reason why the Steelers aren't 5-12 every season and instead are 9-8, 10-7, and it's mainly because of this defense. We start off with Derek Harmon. He's going to be starting at defensive end. It's going to be his first season out of Oregon. He's a rookie. And then you have Keanu Bitten. It's going to be his third season. He was a second-round draft pick in 2023. Looks like he's going to improve as well. And then you have Cam Hayward. Dude has been around forever, entering his 15th season in the NFL. That's pretty much abnormal for any defensive guy in the NFL, but he's still very solid, which is still crazy impressive, but you never know. Father Time is undefeated, so 2025 could be the downfall of Cam Hayward, but again, you never know. Then you go to the linebackers. Obviously, we know about TJ Watt, arguably the best defensive player in the NFL. Now, there were some reports coming out that the Steelers would be willing to be okay with trading him. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me being the Steelers, but I think he's going to be a Steeler for the long term at least. And then you have Patrick Queen. He's proven himself to be a top 10 linebacker in the NFL. For the other linebackers, we're starting off with Alex Highsmith, who had a very, very good season in 2022, but his stats have kind of declined since then. Hopefully, he's not a one-year wonder, but he's still a very solid linebacker. Then you have Peyton Wilson. It's going to be his second season from NC State, and he only started 4 games in 2024, but he had 78 tackles in those 4 games started. Well, I mean, not in those 4 games started, but only 4 games started. I think you get what I'm trying to say, but I remember him coming into the NFL. I was very high on him, and I'm still very high on him. The potential is without a doubt there, so hopefully he gets some more starting reps this season. Now, with the Jalen Ramsey-Minkah Fitzpatrick trade, it created a weird conundrum within the secondary for this team. You now have 3 cornerbacks. Now, thankfully, you also have a nickelback, so it evens out, but I think the secondary is a lot better with 2 starting very solid quarterbacks and Minkah Fitzpatrick, but here we are. Now, you have 2 veterans in Darius Slay and Jalen Ramsey. Even though they're old and quarterback is not a good position if you're old, they're still very solid at the position. And you also have Joey Porter Jr., who's entering his 3rd season, and he's very solid as well, so I really like that quarterback room. Now, it gets a little messy with the safeties. Now, you have Juan Thornhill, who is he's a veteran, and he has Super Bowl experience, and he's not bad at all. I apologize for disrespecting Deshaun Elliott. He's not a bad safety at all. He's definitely a decent, good safety. He's not a Pro Bowl, but why am I still being hateful? He's a decent safety, so I'm sorry for disrespecting Deshaun Elliott, but I think you're in a somewhat better situation if you keep Minkah Fitzpatrick and don't trade for Jalen Ramsey. But that's just my thoughts. If you want to disagree, that's completely okay. I can see both sides. But anyway, that's it with me overviewing the Steelers. I expected 10-7 season. Expected 9-8 season. That's how it usually goes. The moves they made this offseason were definitely interesting. But yeah, that's about it. See you.